Welcome to episode 17 of Michael McCoy's Garden. The 7th of April 1998. The gravel garden, which is still in full bloom, has not yet been watered this season, though growing through part of the driest 18 months on record. The plants now in bloom don't seem to need the water, but I'm desperate for it to rain so that some planting can be done before it gets too cold. There are several very precious things that I've not yet planted, knowing that I would have to nurse them through until the rain, and it wouldn't be wise to plant them once it gets too cold. With the exception of bare-rooted trees, almost everything is better off planted while the roots are still in active growth. I'm very pleased with how my bit of gravel garden looks, but I'm a little sorry that I began on what is, and what was always intended to be, a fairly dynamic space. It's a place to flow through, a place for the plants. Some plantsmen's gardens wind up being entirely this sort of space, paths cut through planting, and you can walk right through them, returning to the starting point without ever being encouraged to pause or to sit. My gravel garden is a garden to look at, rather than to be in. The garden furniture seems to have settled in a spot under the low-hanging branches of the pin oak, which is the only really decent tree we have. You almost have to climb under the branches to get to the chairs, but the light is always dappled and vivacious, and we've spent a lot of time there in the afternoons with visitors. This is at the opposite end of the garden, where I intended to pave a spot for a table, but one can't fight these things. People will sit where they are most comfortable, most deeply enveloped in the garden, and that is where the chairs are now. 8th of April, 1998. The season is drawing to a close, and the nasturtiums clearly know it. Talk about seize the day. They're making the most of every moment and look like seizing the entire garden before the month is out. At this rate, they're going to leave the whole thing in ruins, but I can't bring myself to break up the party. In some other dimension, they're making a hell of a racket, and I love the noise. Most nasturtiums these days are very quiet, demure little things that won't put a foot wrong, but I deliberately sought out the worst behaved of the lot, those types that send out huge long runners that will literally climb the walls and get mighty close to hanging from the rafters. Monet used to let the same raffish sorts loose in his Grand Allée each summer, though his paintings give little indication of the din that followed. All too soon, Frost will have the final word, and I'll be left to pick up the pieces. Join me tomorrow to hear of that moment when Frost very emphatically did have the final word. See you then.